Good on you, son.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this has been brought up before, but not in the way that I think is important. We've talked about veterans' pensions and what's happened to them and what's going to happen, but what I would like to do, Mr. Chair, is actually highlight the pieces of legislation that actually enforce this. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous, to be honest, but if I may just say one thing, it did make me smile, Jamie Lee Ross's conversation about the government's policy, and he didn't even know the piece of legislation that was giving force to that policy. It's clause 239, the Kiwisaver bill, Mr. Ross. Mr. Chair, what we've got here in the Income Tax Act, RD5, this is the definition of salary and wages. And Mr. Chair, what clause 11 does in this bill is it amends section RD5 in the Income Tax Act. And what it actually does, it inserts, and I'm going to read the words that it inserts. What it says is, so this is the definition now of wages or salaries. A retirement lump sum paid under Part 5, Subpart 7 of the Veteran Support Act. That was not in here, Mr. Chair. All it said about veterans was a veteran's pension. So it didn't mention anything about a retirement lump sum. So before this piece of legislation came through, remember the veterans, the legislation governing this was only passed last year, to the point where you go out in the hall to find the legislation that gets some cross-referencing. It's not even there. So I suspect that what happened is the RSA did a whole lot of work around this with their members and said, if you have received a retirement lump sum, then you are not subject to tax. So what this has done, less than 12 months after this piece of legislation is passed, we're saying to our veterans, sorry, you're wrong, you are going to pay tax on this. Then, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to go to clause 10. Now, this talks about incapacity. And I suppose this is where what happened is they like to draw the analogy of a veteran's lump sum compared to someone on ACC who's had an accident, which I think is it's quite a long bow to draw, in my view, but this is what they've tried to do. And again, there is in the Income Tax Act, in MA 7(3), it talks about incapacity. And it's not a long clause, it's 3 and a bit lines, but they've added a whole lot more into this, and I'll quote, clause 3. Incapacity referred to in subsection 2B and D is an incapacity due to personal injury by accident for which an accident compensation earnings-related payment has been, is being, or will be paid, and also a payment that has been or is being or will be paid under a Veteran Support Act 2004. Now, Mr. Chair, I'm not suggesting that our brave men and women who are heading across to represent us in the Middle East, I don't think this is going to change their decision about whether they'll go or not. But what this is actually saying is if they are injured in the course of their employment, i.e. in the Army, then in the past they would have received a lump sum and it would have been exempt from tax. Now it is taxed. And I don't know how much the Army, and these are often subject to inquiries, I don't know how much a soldier would get if he is injured or she is injured, but whatever it is now minus 30%, because I'm assuming our soldiers are on the top tax rate, which is, So this has been inserted as well. Mr. Chair, if we go to section 9 now, this is about pensions. Now, this talks about section CW28, pensions, and this is the Income Tax Act. And the title of CW28 in the Income Tax Act is Income from Living Allowances, Compensation, Government Grants. And it talks about exempt income in the Act. So it lists a whole lot of things where that's exempt income, and income is where you pay tax. And what it did say is the following are exempt income, a pension or allowance under the War Pensions Act 1954 other than a veteran's pension. So there was always a recognition that if you received a veteran's pension, then it was not exempt from tax. It's like your superannuation payment. You pay tax on that. You can argue about the rights and wrongs of that till we're blue in the face, but that's not a part of this bill. Now what they've done, Mr. Chair, is they've added in a section, so exempt from tax other than a pension, but excluding a veteran's pension, which was always there, and a retirement lump sum paid under Part 5, Subpart 7 of that Act. Mr. Chair?
Stuart Nash.
of that Act. So, good choice, Mr. So again,
I did look for someone else.
what it's actually doing here is we're closing down any loophole where a war veteran who has been injured or is receiving a lump sum or for whatever reason, and I'm not too sure what the reasons are, Mr. Chair, because obviously the statute book hasn't even been printed yet. But if a veteran received a lump sum, then they now must pay tax on that. And then we go to clause 8, Mr. Chair. This talks about, it references Section CF1 of the Income Tax Act as well, and that is the thing of it. This is about benefits, pensions, compensation, and government grants. And it talks about, again, what defines income. And we all have an idea of what defines income, but remember, this isn't wages and salaries. This is pensions, compensations, and grants. So it's things like, listed in the Act, things like an accident compensation payment, an education grant, an income-tested benefit, a living alone payment, New Zealand superannuation payment, parental leave paid under Part 7A, and the veteran's pension. Those are all the things that are counted as income under the benefits, pensions, compensation, and government grants of the income tax. However, what is now included under income, under this, is a retirement lump sum. So this is retirement lump sum now, nothing to do with injury or incapacity. A retirement lump sum paid under Part 5, subsection C of the Veteran Support Act 2014. So in effect, Mr. Chair, what this bill does is if a veteran is to receive a lump sum for whatever reason, whether they are retiring, whether they are injured, whether the result of an accident or anything like this, they must now pay tax on this. And, again, we can argue about the merits of this, but the thing that gets to me a little bit, the thing that rackles with me, actually, is this is a piece of legislation, the Veterans Support Act 2014, which is quite critical, passed less than a year ago. And I would have thought that this is quite an important part of an act, whether a veteran is to pay tax. And I wouldn't mind Mr. Bailey talking about this because he is a colonel in our Defence Force, and I wouldn't mind knowing what his views are, because I have no doubt, Mr. Chair, that some of that member's soldiers under his command are going to come and say to him, goodness me, what is going on here? But the interesting thing is this is retrospective. This is retrospective. This goes back to December 2014. So, Mr. Chair, there may well be soldiers, veterans out there who have been given money, well, not given money, they've earned it, but they have been injured by accident or they've retired and they have banked that. They've paid off their Auckland mortgage, they've given their grandkids money or whatever, and the government is now going to go back to them and say, sorry chap, we are now going to take 33% of that off you, and I do not think that is fair.
I regret to inform the member the time has come for me to leave the chair for the dinner break. I will resume the chair at 7:30.